And now, the worldwide phenomenon. One records in Stowmarket, the other records in Houston. Alex Moss, Burton DeWitt join forces to bring you the weekly Dartscast 180.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's been a rough couple weeks, but I'm doing all right and ready for a long overdue extended holiday starting next week. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing okay, thank you. It's a busy time for me as I change jobs, so lots going on my end, but lots to get to on the show as well. We've got two guests calling in from New Zealand on this week's show, Bernie Smith and Kayden Milne. Both are going to be stopping by before they play in the World Series this weekend. Well, let's start with the World Series. We'll look back at last weekend's action. We had the New South Wales Darts Masters, the second stop on the World Series down under this year, and Johnny Clayton lifting the title, beating James Wade 8-1 in Saturday's final, and it was a first title of the season for last year's Player of the Year, Johnny Clayton. How important was this win for the Ferret heading into what is going to be a busy final third of 2022?
I mean, it certainly was important for exactly that factoid reason that you mentioned about having yet to win a title this year, even though he topped the Premier League group stage convincingly, dominated the group stage of the Premier League, winning 4 nights and being in contention pretty much every night and playing at the best standard of anyone in it. Despite that, had not won a title this year. And after all the titles, not just on television, but just everywhere that he won last year, it certainly was a bit surprising. You know, last year he won 4 televised events. He won 2 events on the floor. If we had anything other than a shortened 2-event Euro Tour schedule, you would have expected that he would have won a few of those as well, because he was one of the best players in the world last year, if not the best player in the world last year. At the end of the year, it really came down to him and Peter Wright to determine who was the player of the year. And you could have made, and people did make, and we both made, legitimate cases for both of them. But he has dropped off a bit this year. Not so significant that you wouldn't have thought he won a title this year, but he certainly had dropped off a bit. And he has not, even this past weekend, reached some of the heights that he had been reaching week in, week out last year. And that's why he hadn't won a title. We were seeing last year very often averaging well north of a ton, and when he needed, and doing so when he needs to. And that's, why even before his breakout year last year, he was always a thorn in the side of Michael Van Gerwen, because when Van Gerwen would throw a 105 at him, he would lift his game and throw the 105 right back. And that's the type of player that Johnny Clayton is on his day, the type of player who can stand face-to-face with Michael Van Gerwen when Michael Van Gerwen is playing well and throw everything that MVG throws at him right back in his face and win. And he just hasn't done that as much this year as he had last year. Did he play his best in the event in Wollongong? No, I don't think he did. His highest average across 4 matches was just a change over 96 in that semifinal against Johnny Clayton. But he did the right things at the right time. He beat Michael Smith in a match that Michael Smith was playing well at, and just by hitting the clutch shots at the right time. He didn't give James Wade more than a poke in that match. And yes, Wade was poor, but whenever Wade had a chance to get into that match, Johnny Clayton would take out a 104 or a 160 for the match to make sure that Wade never even had a finger hold in that match. And that's what Johnny Clayton does at his best. He punishes his opponents relentlessly, and he did that this past weekend. And yes, he was not at his best, but he didn't need to be. He did not even need to be anywhere near his best, and was still good enough to win the title. And that should give him more confidence than if he had just played one weekend where he was blitzing everyone. Because when that happens, you can it's easier to write it off as, okay, I was just in my element that weekend. He wasn't in his element. He played well, but he didn't play very well. And it was still enough to easily win the title. That's the thing that he's going to take out of it. And remember, oh yeah, even my B game is enough to beat the best players in the world, like it was in Wollongong, and like I have every reason to believe it will be in another televised event sometime soon.
Some great points you make there, and I think it was an important win for him to get his hands on any sort of silverware during the trip, because, as you say, if we take out those Premier League weekly titles out of the equation, this was the first full tournament that Johnny's won in the PDC, dating back to the World Series finals October last year, so almost 10 months without a title. And this is someone that picked up a lot of silverware last year, and of course none bigger than the weekly Dartscast Player of the Year, which was voted for by our listeners, and a deserved winner because of all those titles that he won. Take out all those major titles that he's won last year, whether you think they're a major title or not, he won 4 titles on TV, and that did really propel him to being one of the top players in the world and really a contender in all the big events. And he had the resume of recent results, recent titles to back that up. This year, although he's not won a title before the weekend just gone, he has shown his class at times, hasn't he? As you say, in the Premier League, finishing top of the table, won more of those nightly titles than anyone else. And in the playoffs, came up short against Joe Cullen, who, although he finished 4th, was coming into that finals night with a lot of belief, a lot of confidence from the run that he had just to make the top 4 on his debut. So has he been consistent as he was last year, Johnny Clayton? You've got to say no. And the guys at Darts Oracle, if we're looking at the numbers, his running average for this year is more than 1.5 points lower than it was across 2021. And, still a touch over 97, which is in the top 5 across the PDC. So he's still playing at a very good level and just not getting the titles that he was winning last year. And, okay, his performances at the weekend, as far as the averages, they weren't close to his running average for the year. But I think a few things that we did see at the weekend, some of the key things that we see in Johnny Clayton's game that were a staple in his game last year, and I'm thinking of the timing on some of those shots, the doubles as well. He was just under 40% for the doubles. In a few of the games, he was a bit higher than that. But I think the timing as well, and you mentioned that game against Michael Smith, they were locked at 4 legs all. Johnny Clayton holds in 14 darts. Michael Smith misses a dart at tops for 5 all, and Johnny Clayton takes out the 136. And even in the final against James Wade, he had a 120 and then a 160 to win it 8-1. Those are the big finishes, the big checkouts that we remember really from Johnny's incredible 2021. I think back to that World Grand Prix final against Goen Price. What was it? A 170 and a 164 in back-to-back legs. And yeah, we know that when he's on his doubles, he can be one of the best double hitters in the game. And it looks like he's maybe getting back towards that after the weekend and picking up a title will do him good. And he said himself afterwards, hopefully this can kickstart his year. And looking to the rest of the year, he's not really got a lot to defend. So if he could go and pick up another major title, another ranking major title, he could be heading towards that top 4 come the end of the year.
Now, one more event remains in the triple header down in Australia and New Zealand, and of course that being the event in New Zealand this upcoming weekend. Of the players in the field, though, who do you think most needs a run in the New Zealand Darts Masters?
Well, I'm going to focus on the 8 PDC representatives for this one, and straight away I'm going to discount the 2 title winners that we've had. So Michael van Gerwen, who won the Queensland Masters a couple of weeks ago, Johnny Clayton, who we've just spoke about, won at the weekend. So I'm not including those 2. And going into this triple header of events, I did point out the 2 Welsh players, Goen Price, Johnny Clayton, that they might be 2 players to watch out for because they've not won a title on TV for a little while, either of them, and they're used to winning titles on TV. So they'll both want to make their mark, and Johnny Clayton's done that with that title at the weekend. Goen Price, he's had a final and a semi-final, and I think he's someone that he'll want to get that title this weekend, get that title winning feeling back on TV. I think the last title that he won on TV was the Grand Slam, and we've just seen him go back to the world number 1. So I think to get a title on TV this weekend, okay, it's not the biggest of titles there is to win, but just to get that title under his belt as he's now got back to world number 1, I think that would send a message out there to the rest of the field. And he's playing better than he's done for a little while now. And looking at a few of the other players, I'm probably going to discount Dimitri van den Berg because he's won a couple of World Series events in Europe earlier this year. Michael Smith, he's won one in America this year as well, and both of them have got identical records. They've both had a pair of quarterfinals on this trip so far, so maybe they'll want to get a little bit further and get another final, maybe get another title. James Wade, we've seen just make that final the weekend, and that really leaves 2 players. And Joe Cullen, I think someone that we said on the show last week about how well he played in the first event. He's had 2 semi-finals now, and I think he'll be someone out of those 8 that he probably won't be satisfied unless it's a title this weekend, because he's been knocking on the door a few times now, and most notably that Premier League having that match start. And I think for him to pick up a title again on TV, on the stage, I think it will show him more than anyone else that he can put that Premier League behind him and he can look ahead, get silverware back on his mantelpiece and really kick on and see what else there is to win, because he's shown over the course of this year that he is someone that can contest for major titles. He's won the Masters. He's got to that Premier League final. So I think for him to get a title this weekend, I think he'll be out of those 8 the one that will want to get a title the most. And that just leaves us with Fallon Sherrock, and she's had a first round defeat, quarterfinals so far on this trip, and she'll be the first to admit that we've not seen her best game these last few weeks. And of course, away from the World Series, we've got the Women's Series this weekend. She's got quite a nice lead. I think it's around £2,000 on Lorraine Winstanley for that second spot. Of course, the top 2 get to Ali Pali. Fallon won't be there this weekend, and Lorraine, she's won a Women's Series event. She's just won on the WDF circuit in Sweden at the weekend, so she's going to be full of confidence going into that Women's Series, looking to make a dent on that top 2. But I think for Fallon, that the focus, of course, will be on the World Series this weekend, and if she can end the trip on a high, get a few wins under her belt, more performances like she know that she can produce, then that bodes well for her going into that last Women's Series weekend. We don't know what the gap's going to be between that second spot. She might not even be second spot going into that last weekend. So I think for her, getting a few wins this weekend would do her well going into that last weekend.
Yeah, I agree with most everything you said there. And I think Fallon Sherrock is the one who's most in need of a run. Because you said, she hasn't played her best down in this series. She hasn't played even her B or C game. She really has been struggling a lot this year. There's been flashes. There were moments where she was unplayable in the women's world match play a month ago. But there were also moments where you didn't think either player would hit the double to end the leg. And that's been just some real problem with her game, especially the finishing this year, which we didn't see last year, because last year she did look like a star. That's why she made the final with one of the most remarkable comebacks ever along the way to it in the Danish Darts Masters or the Nordic Darts Masters last year, and had every chance to win the final, taking a huge lead and making Michael van Gerwen, who was struggling for form at that time, to have to find it to win that match. It's why she made the quarterfinals at the Grand Slam and pushed the player who at that time was the best or second best player in the world all the way in a high quality quarterfinal. But she's been nowhere near that this year. She has not looked the same player by any stretch of the imagination. Talk about how Glenn Durrant's form has fallen off a cliff. Fallon Sherrock's has as well. And I don't know why it is. I don't know if she's put too much pressure on herself. I don't know if she has lost a little bit of motivation for these events after not winning her tour card. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's probably something to do with putting too much pressure on herself. But I don't know for sure. But she's not anywhere near the player she was last year. And all it takes is one good weekend to click back in. And there have been some signs that she might in the Women's Series and in some other events she's played in, but it hasn't shown on this World Series tour. And she needs a good performance to come out of this trio of events. Beyond that, I agree that Joe O'Cullen would love to get something that's merited his performances, because he's been playing really well, but he hasn't gotten through to a final yet. Despite that, this is his last chance in this trio of World Series events, his first ever trio of World Series events, to make that first World Series final. And he's played well enough to deserve one, but he hasn't done it yet. But I think a little bit more should be said for Michael Smith as well. And yes, he's won a World Series event already this year. But he's a player who, when he won that World Series event, went into each event thinking, I can win this particular title and nobody will be surprised. I will be more surprised if I don't win it than if I do. That's how good he was playing at that time. He won a pair of Players' Championship events. He won a Premier League night. He won the World Series event. And he was going far in pretty much every tournament for a couple months there, or at the very least, playing at a really high standard and requiring someone to play out of their skin to beat him. He's been playing well these last two World Series events, but he hasn't gotten any reward for it. Well, he's had some really good performances. He did not play well in the quarterfinals in Queensland, but that followed up a match where he averaged well north of a ton. And in New South Wales in Wollongong last week, he played two really good matches. As I mentioned, Johnny Klayden just figured out a way to beat him despite that. Michael Smith has dropped off a little bit over the last month or so. And he went from looking like he was the best player in the world, which he was for a couple months, to looking like he's still one of the best. But that is a big difference between being the man to beat and one of the people there to pick up the scraps because he's good enough to do that. He wants to reestablish himself as the player to beat, and a good weekend in New Zealand will get that started. And there's no better time to be the best player in the world than as we get into September and October, because almost every week there's either a televised event or a Euro Tour, and especially those televised events are where Michael Smith still hasn't broken through, in the major ones at that. And if he can get that confidence back and get back to playing at the level that is the best player in the world, then all the better for him, and it starts with a big weekend in New Zealand.
We shall see. Well, now let's move on to one of the players who will be playing in the New Zealand Darts Masters this weekend. Here's our chat with Bernie Smith.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the qualifiers for the upcoming New Zealand Darts Masters, Bernie Smith. Thanks for the time, Bernie. How you doing?
Good, mate. How you going?
Doing good, thank you. And let's start with that World Series event. When we're talking now less than 2 weeks before you will be playing in Hamilton, making your return to the World Series, how are you feeling just 2 weeks away now from that return to the big stage?
Pretty good, mate. Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. It's been a while.
Well, we'll circle back to the World Series later, but let's go back to the beginning for you in darts. How old were you when you discovered the game, and how did you get introduced to it?
My dad was a New Zealand darts champion. I didn't really I wasn't really into it when he was playing, but I started playing when I started going to the pub, and things, I got a bit better than most, and next minute I was playing seriously, so probably the last 30 odd years.
And I was reading up as well, you also played softball and rugby before concentrating on the darts, so what persuaded you to focus on the darts instead of the other two?
Well, I was getting on a bit, so yeah, I was playing softball till I was probably 30, and I was still, when I first made New Zealand dart team, that's when I gave up rugby league, saved myself the pain and the injuries.
So from that point on, have you always played darts at some level, or have you had any breaks from playing over the years?
Well, we've had a big break because of COVID, but yeah, I've always played darts since then, probably the last 30 years. Tried to retire a few times, but I keep playing because I can't stop throwing darts. Like I throw every single day at home, so I don't know, it's just in me, I suppose. Still playing the first grade competitions at home. So,
well, being from New Zealand, what has the darts scene been like when you first started out? You mentioned you started playing out in the pubs. Was there a lot of leagues and tournaments to play in?
I was just playing socially back then. I think probably last 10 years, the standard of darts and the amount of darts you can play has really picked up in New Zealand. It's just gone crazy in the last couple of months. We've been locked down. There's a lot of stuff that people couldn't do, and they're really packing in the tournaments at the moment. So yeah, it's pretty good right now.
And you mentioned there about the standard improving, more events to play in. What do you think's been the big changes to the dart scene in New Zealand over the years?
I'd say it's definitely the PDC putting their stuff on TV. You get guys coming out of their garages, and man, they are good. Like, there's guys that come out, and their standard is so high, and it's unbelievable. We don't know where they came from. It's unbelievable.
Well, in 2004, you were part of New Zealand's team, which won the team event at the WDF Asia Pacific Cup out in Singapore. What are your memories of winning that title for your country?
I remember, it was probably about I think that was my second trip away, actually, and I was still pretty raw, pretty new. I remember the nerves. I was quite nervous. I had a really good partner, Robbie Grant, who has passed away now. He was one of our top players back then. I was still really, really nervous. Like, it was my early days of darts. So I do remember that, actually. Yeah.
So playing for New Zealand, what were those moments like when you got your first call up to play for your country, and then I guess putting on that shirt to play for New Zealand?
Well, obviously, it's a great privilege to play for your country. It's, when you play, like, our first time to represent was through WDF. So that was the biggest thing back then for us. And everyone was striving to make those sides. And, yeah, it was enormous. It was a big goal of everyone's.
Well, let's fast forward a few years. 2008, one of your first big titles in New Zealand, winning the New Zealand National Championships, followed by the New Zealand Masters a few months later. What did those wins mean to you at the time?
So my first New Zealand title for council was pretty quite emotional, actually, because my dad had been a New Zealand champion, and then I sort of stepped up, and it's quite hard to explain, actually. But it's really good to get those sort of things. It's they have two nationals in New Zealand, which is a club, working men's club nationals, and Darts Council. And Darts Council is affiliated to WDF, so obviously that was still our pinnacle then. So, and now Dart Players New Zealand have associated us with the PDC, so we've got two cracks at whatever now, so it's good.
Yeah, you mentioned just about your dad being a previous winner of that event. So how special was it to then follow in his footsteps and I guess win it back to back, because you won it 2009 as well?
Yeah, it was awesome. It's quite. My dad passed a couple of years after that, so yeah, it was pretty good to do it while he was still around. Yeah.
Well, let's fast forward a few years. Your first taste of the World Series was 2016, playing in the Auckland Darts Masters. What was that experience like for you, playing on the big stage in an event like that for the first time?
Yeah, that was really good. Like, nerve-wracking once again. Played Gary Anderson. You're trying to control your nerves, and that's very hard. First time on stage on TV. Yeah, but those guys, they actually make you feel comfortable when you do go up there. You're in the back room, and you think it would be really daunting, but no, they're really good guys, and they want you to put on a show as well. So it's really good.
Yeah, you mentioned you went up against Gary Anderson in the first round. He was in red-hot form at the time. I think he averaged 106 in that game against you, and he won the title that weekend. What are your memories of playing Gary, who at the time was, of course, the reigning world champion as well?
Yeah, well, I wanted to play him because he was number one at the time. Yeah, just such a good guy. We met up again at World Champs in 17, 18, and just regular guys, mate. They're so good.
Yeah, you mentioned the World Championship. A year later, you're heading to an even bigger stage, the Ali Pali, after winning that Oceanic Masters to qualify for your first PDC World Championship. What was that moment like when you won the Oceanic Masters to book your spot in what is the biggest tournament in darts?
Yeah, I remember playing in that final. I was playing against a young fella, Tahuna, who was also from New Zealand. It took me ages to put him away. I felt like I was mucking around in the end. Not on purpose, but I just couldn't hit my doubles, put it away. But as soon as I hit it took a while to sink in that, you're going to England to rub shoulders with all the guns, and yeah, it's a really good moment.
And you got a win on your debut as well, wrapping up your first round win with a 1-4-6 finish as well. How good was it to close out a win like that with a big finish, get that win on your debut?
I've actually finished on that. I finished on that finish a few times, and for some reason I knew I was going to hit it. So it sounds a bit cocky, but 1-4-6, smile on my face. I'm thinking, man, I'm going to hit this before I even went up there, and it just went the way I planned it, and yeah, it was so good.
A good feeling to have. And the next round against Justin Pipe was a match that caused quite a stir with the whole Coughgate incident with Justin. We had Justin on our show a few years ago, and he spoke about it, and he said how nice you were to him afterwards about the whole situation. And watching that clip back, we didn't see you react to it. Did you hear anything at all when you were throwing?
No, mate. No, there's nothing there. There's nothing. I missed double 10. It's still there in my brain. Missing double 10s. Yeah, there was my chance to play Phil, but yeah. There's nothing from Justin. It was all good.
Good to hear. And Justin, he obviously got a lot of bad press off the back of that. But what was it like for you being involved in something like that, which attracted so much attention? Was it strange for you, or did you manage to steer clear of it?
I actually steered clear of it. I said to someone tried to ring me, and I said I've got nothing to say about it. Like the very next morning, they rang me. I was like just woke up. They rang me and said, "Oh, it's all blowing up, blah blah blah." Oh, that was ZB in New Zealand, and I said, "I've got nothing to say to this." Yeah, I just keep out of it. So I spoke to Justin. After that, I've texted him. Plenty of times after that. It was all good.
Good to hear. And your next appearance on the big stage is only a few weeks away now, but going into the start of this year, obviously you touched on it, a lot of the last 2 years has been disrupted with the virus. So what were your hopes for this year darts-wise? We hoped we'd see the World Series return to Australia and New Zealand. It has come back. What were your aims for the year?
I actually didn't have any because I'm sort of more into the background of darts now. Like, I'm not captaining in any sides anymore. I'll play my first grade on Wednesday nights, try and play a bit on Saturdays. Any tournaments in Christchurch I'll try and get to. But darts haven't been on the front for me, the last 2 years. I haven't been out of Christchurch since COVID started. This will be my first trip out of Christchurch, so it's quite weird.
Well, let's look back at those qualifiers for the World Series. Took place about a month or so ago now, and I was looking through your results. Quite a few close games on the way to winning that qualifier. Just how tough was it to get through that?
It was really tough. I played on the Saturday. I set up the venue down there. It was a brand new venue, and I was still working on it on the Saturday morning. So I had my gear and my dart clothes in a bag. I was still sorting out hockeys. I was making sure all the advertising was up. 10 minutes to go before check-in shut. I said, I'm going to play. And so, I paid my entry fee and I got dressed and said, I've done all the work, so might as well have a beer and play. And then my section, so we play, I don't know if you guys do, we play section play, 5 in a section, and you have to win 2 of those. It's a round robin of 5, you're going to win 2 of those to go to the knockout. I only, what did I get? I only won 2. So I won 2 of the 4 games. Yeah, it's 5-man round robin, so 4 games. I won 2 of the 4 games, and then there was AJ Takira. He was in my section, and I actually beat him. He was he's one of the top players in New Zealand as well. And I ended up playing him, I think, in the semi, and I snuck him again, and then I got to play Ben Robb, who's he's our number 1 DPNC player at the moment. Yeah, and I managed to scrape through there. A 7-6, good game, yeah.
So the late decision to play turned out pretty well. As you say, you beat Ben Robb 7-6 in that final. How are you feeling after coming through that final? Was it more relief than anything, or were you just happy to have won, secured that spot?
Like when I got to the final, getting to the semi, I didn't, I wasn't really, I was relaxed, so I think that helped because I had no expectations. And then I managed to scrape through that semi and then beat Ben in the final. Like, Ben's had the water on me for the last few years. Every time every time we've played, he's beaten me. Semis, quarters, whatever. And yeah, he's just one of the young fellas that have come through the grades, and now he's really up there. Like, he's knocking on the professional door right now. So yeah, it was good to have a win against him.
Definitely, and not long to go now until you'll be playing in the World Series again. How much are you looking forward to being back on that stage? And you said it's going to be the first time out of Christchurch for you for a little while. Are you taking a lot of support with you there as well?
Well, my sister and her husband are coming. I know most of the players around the place anyway, so yeah, I'm not taking anyone with me. But yeah, I guess I'll have support. A lot of people know me, so hopefully they'll support me.
I'm sure they will. And lastly, before we let you go, after the World Series, what have you got lined up darts-wise for the rest of this year? You mentioned you're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes now for darts, but have you got any events left on the calendar you're looking forward to?
Yeah, it was supposed to be playing in a big tournament down in the Cargill. It was an invitation tournament, and people have played off to play against the invited players, so that's going to be quite a good one. There's also one that's in October. There's supposed to be one in September that a few of the boys go to, and yeah, I'll probably go to that too. So it'll be quite good to get away with the boys for a change, have a couple of beers and win a few games, and yeah.
Happy days. Well, before then, it's going to be the World Series in a few weeks' time. Congratulations again on qualifying again, and we wish you all the best when that comes around, and thanks very much for your time.
Oh, not a problem, man. It's good to have a little chat to you, so yeah, I'll listen out for this one.
Thanks again to Bernie for joining us now from the World Series to the Development Tour, and a pair of titles for Josh Rock has seen him climb to the top of the Development Tour with one weekend to go. Can you see anyone stopping him now from finishing top and taking that Grand Slam spot?
Well, he's really the only person who can stop himself. And assuming he goes and plays the last 4 events, because remember, even though there's normally 5 because of the start of the World Youth Championship, there'll only be 4 more events at the next weekend. Then there's no one who will, because he's now more than 3 points clear of anyone else on averages. And if you go just based on the performances this past weekend, even more so. He was maybe not playing at the same level that he can sometimes do on the Pro Tour, but pretty darn close. If you look across those 5 events, he averaged north of a ton in 8 matches, including a pair of finals. He averaged 112 in the final of the first event on Friday, and averaged 104.5 with a 19 dart leg thrown in there in the second of those finals on Friday, which are 2 of the 5 highest final averages ever on the Development Tour since 2018 when we have Dart Connect. That's the level he can play at. And it's more noteworthy when he's averaging under 90 than when he's averaging over 100 because of how often he does it. He is just so far above everyone else, with the possible exception of Keen Barry, that it's going to be tough to stop him. Now, Keen Barry didn't have his best weekend, but Keen Barry, I think, can play at a similar level, or at least a competitive enough level, that he can pick up a couple titles. And I think it's going to take a couple of titles to deny Josh Rock the top spot, because it would be surprising if Josh Rock didn't win a title at the last 4 events, which means someone's going to have to win too. And really, Keen Barry's the one who's closest, if they're going to, or Nathan Rafferty, if they're going to reel him in. Josh Rock is just, he really is a cut above. And I don't know what more to say. I mean, as impressive as those 2 titles on Friday were, I think his run on Saturday in that first event is even more noteworthy, because first match, 1-4-0. Second match, 1-4-0. Third match, 1-4-0. Fourth match, 1-4-0. Fifth match, 1-4-0. Sixth match, going against Keen Barry, dropped the second leg, but won the first leg and won the last 4 in that. He dropped 2 legs against Adam Gavlas in what was his worst match of the day. And then finally in the final, somehow lost to Jean Van de Veen, but he played pretty well in that match. He had a couple of bad legs thrown in, including the decider. Van de Ven had winning legs of 16, 12, 15, 18. That was one of the bad ones. And 14. He had to play at a really good standard to beat Josh Rock, who still was averaging 95.5. I thought it was really impressive going all the way to the finals, dropping only 8 legs across those 8 matches. Granted, 5 were in the final. He is just a cut above and then some. If anyone denies him, it's either because he skipped the final weekend or Keane Barry or Nathan Rafferty have really done something special in Barnsley. Could it happen? Sure. But it will be special if he is denied.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that you brought up the World Youth Championship. I was just thinking about that as well, because last year, of course, Ted Everts, that was his final year on the development tour, the most successful player we've ever seen on the development tour with those 14 titles, and he capped it off by winning that World Youth Championship at the last opportunity. But looking down the list, the only former winner we've now got eligible to play in this year's event is, of course, Bradley Brooks, who won the first title this year. But you look at all the other players that are going to be in the mix for that World Youth Championship: Josh Rock, Nathan Rafferty, Keane Barry, Gert Nenches, Louis Williams. You know, the list goes on. It's going to be a very, very competitive tournament, that one, come the end of the year. But before then, of course, it is the development tour, and that Grand Slam spot is in the mix for a few of these players and a few of the tour card holders as well. And I said on last week's show, if Josh Rock can bring his Pro Tour form to the development tour at the weekend, he's going to have a big say. And on the Players' Championship events, he was averaging 96. Development tours around 90. Well, Philip Wolf, the German darts statistician, he put out on Twitter today when we're recording that Josh averaged 95.90 across those 5 events at the weekend. So that just shows you that when he plays like that, he can get the results that we've just seen: 2 titles and a final from the first 3 events. And he started the weekend in 4th spot, almost 2.5 grand behind Keane Barry for that top spot. Wins the first event, wins the second event, loses out in a decider in that 3rd event. But he's got a decent lead, hasn't he? Just over £1,000 now after those 5 events. And you mentioned as well the averages as well: 112 in that first final, the highest we've seen in the Dart Connect era for a development tour final, eclipsing Jeffrey Desvanu, who had 109 back in 2019. But yeah, to get 2 titles in the final, the first 3 events, of course, it was Keane Barry who beat him in the quarterfinals for the 4th event, the final event going out in the last 32. So I did tip Josh Rock last week. Me and you both had Josh Rock and Keane Barry as the top 2. Of course, Nathan Rafferty with that title in the last event, who we're going to talk about a bit more in a moment. He's now between those 2 players, but I went with Josh Rock. I'm going to stick with him, and I guess the only thing that could really stop Josh Rock from playing in that last weekend in October is going to be the World Grand Prix, and he's around £10,000 off the spots at the moment. He is going to be in 2 of the 3 Euro Tours that we've got left before the cut-off, so there's quite a bit of work there to do if he's going to be in the World Grand Prix. And it's the quarterfinals onwards for that event that clashes with the development tour. So he's going to have a good run in the Euro Tour, then have a good run at the World Grand Prix for him to miss out on those development tours. And Keane Barry's in the same situation as well. He's in 2 out of the 3. But I think that is the only thing that I can see stopping Josh Rock from getting that top spot. If he plays like he did at the weekend in the final weekend, I think we're going to be seeing him in the Grand Slam in November.
I mean, I could see us seeing him in the Grand Slam in November, even if he's not top of the development tour order of merit, because it would not be that surprising if he makes a televised final before then, and even if he doesn't, wins through the qualifier. He really is something special. Now, also the first development tour title of the year for 2 players, Gian van de Ven and Louis Williams, and a 7th overall 3rd of 2022 for Nathan Rafferty. What did you make of those 3 players' run to the titles on Saturday and Sunday?
Well, I'll start off with the man that ended Josh Rock's winning run at the weekend, which was just the 22 matches, and that was Gian van Veen. And there's a lot of talk, isn't there, when the development tour comes around and we're seeing tour card holders mop up a lot of the titles, Josh Rock winning a couple, Nathan Rafferty winning 1, Louis Williams winning 1, and should the tour card holders be allowed to play in it? Well, the only player that didn't have a tour card that won an event at the weekend, Gian van Veen. And I was looking at his record, really, because 2019 development tour, he averaged 67, 2020 put 12 points on that, 79, 2021 put 1 point on it, 80 average, and then this year he's up to 87. So that shows you that the development tour is a system that works. You can see that players, they come onto the tour, they might not be fully progressed yet, fully developed yet, to use the phrase there, but you can see year on year they're making progress in the averages alone and even in the results as well. And Gian, who's this wasn't his first PDC title, he won a Challenge Tour title out in Germany last month, and he averaged I think it was 97 in the final, 100 in the semi-final. So it shows that when it gets to the final end of tournaments, he can produce some quality stuff, and he has been knocking on the door of a development tour title as well. And the way to do it is to beat Josh Rock, isn't it? Beat him in the final, win a last leg decider with a 14 darter on throw in that last leg. That shows you the quality that he's got. And I think last year as well, we had that split with the development tour and the challenge tour. We had a UK one and a European one, and that's when we saw Gian start to pick up some better results, get some deeper runs. He had a semi-final and a quarter-final on the development tour, quarter-final on the challenge tour, and this year we've seen him make further progress, get to a final on the development tour, and now he's picked up a pair of titles, one on the challenge tour, one on the development tour. And yeah, he's someone that is making some real progress, only 20, so he's got a few more years on the development tour to play on. And yeah, he's definitely someone to watch out for. And Louis Williams, someone that will be more well known because he is a tour card holder, won it at Q School in 2021, so this is his second year on the tour. And this year he's had a couple of finals, lost in last legs to Josh Rock and Nathan Rafferty, and I think it's something like 8 quarterfinals that he's had as well. So he's had a lot of deep runs this year, not got the title until this weekend. And you look at his run to the title, okay, on paper, it's not the best run we've seen from a player, is it? He averaged 75 in his first game. Then the rest of the averages was 84 to 89, and we know he can play better than that. But you look at some of the games, 2 of the games which went 4-3, he had a 16 darter to win it, the other game a 14 darter, and then the final against Kevin DeWitt, a 13 darter to win it 5-4. So that quality right at the end of games, when it matters the most, he was able to do it. And you know, this is someone that at the moment his tour card is on the line, isn't it? I think he's around 63rd on that post World Championship order of merit. So a lot of work for him to do, but maybe you could keep that tour card via the development tour, because there's a lot of players above him that have already got their tour cards for next year. So definitely an important win for him. And lastly, Nathan Rafferty, just touch on him as well. He's now only the 5th player to have won 7 development tour titles. Of course, the record, Ted, with 14, is going to take some doing. His management, they're backing him to break the record. I think he's 23 in January, so I think he's got another year at least to play on it. But again, someone that's got a tour card this year, a lot of talent there, and up to second. So he's going to be in with a shout at that Grand Slam. And of course, we saw him in the Grand Slam last year make it through the group. So again, someone to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were all impressive in different ways. I mean, you mentioned Louis Williams. He didn't play at his best, but again, you can only beat what is thrown in front of you. And I think the impressive thing is just the consistency he put up across those matches. Other than his first round match, his lowest average was 84.55 and his highest was 89.85. He basically played at the same standard across 7 matches. And he followed that up on the Sunday with another run to the semifinals before going out to Kevin Dotes, who's been very good this year, making up now 3 finals, including a title on the development tour, and one of the players to look out for over the next few years. One other thing to mention for Louis Williams is he beat Robin Bager, a very nice kid from Germany who I had pleasure of meeting in Riesa a couple years ago. And I just want to shout out just how much he's improved, because I remember when I was talking with him now a few years ago, he was normally averaging in the low 70s and like he would play some of the Euro Tour qualifiers for fun. He averaged in those 2 matches 87 and 86, and even beat earlier in the year Louis Williams, averaging 88. So significant improvement for the young German. But Louis Williams did what he needed to across the day and won, and that's impressive. John Van de Veen, he had a little bit more difficult to run, obviously going against Josh Rock in the final when Josh Rock had barely dropped a leg all day, having dropped only 3 legs in the tournament, but hadn't dropped a match across the 2 tournaments a day before or that final, and able to beat him, even though, okay, Josh Rock wasn't throwing the well north of 100 averages that he was in the final the previous day, was still playing pretty well, and to beat him in a last leg decider is very impressive. But also beat Owen Roelofs, who's a good player. Owen Roelofs in the semifinals, Kevin Dotes in the quarterfinals. Katie Sheldon, she didn't play well anywhere near her standard earlier on, but he was able to beat her to 0 in the second round. So it didn't have the easiest of matchups, but did what was needed to be done. And then finally, Nathan Rafferty, what more do we have to say? He is, okay, he's not Josh Rock, but nobody is. He is that second best or third best player on the development tour this weekend and this year. Played very well, especially beating Dotes and Nenches, who are two of the best players in the semifinals and quarterfinals, beating Adam Gavlos earlier on, Justin Van de Gouw, who, that was actually the lowest quality of all those matches. But again, not the easiest of routes, but did everything that was needed to beat those players and win a third title of the year.
And now we'll move on to our next guest on this week's show, another young player who's going to be making his debut in the World Series in New Zealand this weekend. Here's our chat with Kayden Milne.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the debutants in this year's New Zealand Darts Masters, Kayden Milne. Thanks for the time, Kayden. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And it's been a little over 3 weeks now since you won through the qualifiers to get that spot in your first World Series event. What have those last 3 weeks been like as you prepare to make your debut on TV?
They've been hectic as just organising sponsors and messaging people, just organising everything, trying to practice here and there as well. But yeah, just hectic as.
When you make that walk onto the stage in Hamilton, still a few weeks away, but for a lot of our listeners, it'll be the first time that they've seen you play. And I was having a read up, you're still only 22, but for our listeners, where are you from and what do you do away from darts?
So I'm living in Christchurch, New Zealand, obviously. And yeah, when I'm not playing darts, I'm riding motorbikes and unfortunately fixing my broken motorbike. That's about all I do, just play darts and ride bikes.
Very nice. Well, let's go back to the start for you in darts. How old were you when you discovered the game? How did you get introduced to darts?
So my old man plays and we have a dartboard up at the house and yeah, just picked them up one day that I found some darts lying around. I think I was probably like 10 or something. And yeah, just got hooked then.
So from that point on, were you darts mad or did you dip in and out of it as a youngster? Because when you're a youngster, there's going to be a lot of distractions, school, friends, other sports maybe to try out as well.
Yeah, definitely. I sort of stuck through it, to be honest. I had a few friends at school that played with me, but they sort of lost interest. But I guess I had to go to tournaments with my old man, so I was always at the dart hall anyway. Yeah, and I just never lost interest, really.
And I guess starting out, your dad getting you into darts, he was probably beating you all the time. Do you remember the first time that you beat him in a game?
I don't know if I can remember the specific time that I beat him, but there's been a few other times that have been pretty good getting a win over him. Yeah.
Well, what has the dart scene been like growing up in New Zealand? What have the opportunities been like for you to play? Have there been a lot of leagues, a lot of tournaments to play in?
To be fair, not really. There's more going on now in the last few years, definitely. But yeah, 5 or 6 years ago, probably, there was a tournament sort of like once every month sort of thing, like a big one that you could go to. But now it's like every weekend you've got big tournaments with all the top guys going there. So there's always competition around now. But yeah, a lot better nowadays.
So how good has that been for you to go from having maybe a tournament once a month to having tournaments more regularly, going up against the better players, and has that helped push your game on as well?
Yeah, for sure. Like playing against the top guys, you get that experience and you know that for next time what you've got to do to beat them or maybe to win that extra league instead of, I don't know, maybe not even getting to the double or something. But yeah, definitely playing all the time gives you that confidence to go up against those top guys.
And for a lot of the last 2 years, we've seen the world affected by the pandemic, all the lockdowns. How did that change your outlook on darts? Did you play a lot of online darts, just playing at home, or did you take any breaks at all?
I tried to play online, but I just got too frustrated with it. Like, I guess I enjoy the environment of being at a dart club or hall, with all the players and all your friends there. I definitely kept practicing through COVID, but yeah, didn't get into online very much.
Well, last year when events are starting to come back, we see you win the national youth title. Talk to us about that win. Was that the biggest win of your darts career so far?
Yeah, definitely was. Yeah. Sort of only went up there to just try and see how I went, and ended up getting through to the final, playing another guy from Christchurch, and had a real close final with him. But yeah, it was a real awesome moment for me.
Well, let's get on to the World Series qualifiers. And for our listeners, how does qualification for the New Zealand Darts Masters work? Am I right in saying the DPNZ, they get 4 spots in the tournament?
Yeah, so 2 of them go to the number 1 ranked player, the number 1 and 2 ranked players in New Zealand, and then we have 2 open qualifiers that anyone can play in.
And it was you and Bernie Smith that won those 2 spots in the open qualifier. And looking at your run, you had some close games. Bennett Jones 4-2, John T. Reid 5-3, and then in the semi-finals coming from behind to beat Landon Gardner 6-4. How were you feeling after getting all those wins going into the final?
I was feeling pretty confident. I lost to Hopai the day before, so I sort of knew what I needed to do, where I sort of needed to improve to get a better result this time. And I was feeling pretty good. Wasn't feeling too nervous or anything. Just felt real relaxed, actually, for once.
And as you say, it was Hopai Pua in the final, an experienced player. We've seen him play World Championships in the past, and from 4-all, you win 3 legs on the bounce to come through 7-4. What was that feeling like when you get over the line to secure that spot in the World Series?
Oh man, it was a huge relief. We both missed doubles in that final leg, and I thought that we were going to keep going, but I got another shot, and man, it was just like, I don't know, huge weight off the shoulders, huge relief.
And a lot on the line in that game as well. It gets you to the World Series. It's going to be a TV debut for you as well. How much are you looking forward to that first taste of playing in front of the cameras and against, we don't know who it's going to be yet, but one of the world's best who are travelling over?
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm just hoping that I don't get too starstruck while I'm up there. Hopefully I can hold my nerve on stage as well, but it's going to be surreal.
Do you follow much darts on TV online? How much of a close eye do you keep on that professional game?
To be honest, I sort of only watch the highlights that the PDC put on YouTube. I might do that once every couple of weeks. I'm not a big follower, to be fair.
Is that part of your preparation, scouting out any potential opponents you might have? Is there anyone you'd want to play, get that experience of going up against on the big stage?
Honestly, I'd love to have a crack at the world number 1, I think is Gillian Price at the moment. Or even Michael Van Gerwen's in really good form, so one of those guys. I mean, they're all great players, but I don't really mind, to be honest.
And I was listening to one of the interviews you've done recently, and you said your mum and sister, they've already got tickets to come and watch you in Hamilton, but now as we're only a few weeks away, have you got a lot more friends and family going to come and support you on the day?
A lot of my friends have been talking about getting tickets and organising trips up and stuff, so it's been crazy, the amount of... I didn't expect any of my friends and stuff to do that, but they were just straight away buying tickets and stuff to come up. It's really cool.
Good times. And also heard you're going to be walking out to Black Eyed Peas Pump It as well. What was the thinking behind that choice, or are you just a big fan of the Black Eyed Peas?
I do like their music. I was just trying to think of something that was a little bit different and would hopefully it'll get the crowd pumped up.
Well, looking further ahead, what else have you got planned darts-wise for the rest of the year? Are there any other big events in New Zealand you're going to be playing in? Anything you're most looking forward to going in?
Just got a few of the DPNZ Pro Tours coming up. Just going to look to try and get my ranking up for the World Champ playoffs and maybe have another lucky run and get through that to go to the World Champs would be a dream.
Fingers crossed. And I know you said in a previous interview one day you'd like to get a tour card, play on the professional circuit. How much of a target is that for you at the moment, or is that more of a long-term goal in your darts?
I'd definitely say it's more of a long-term goal. I don't know how I feel about trying to get it at now. I mean, potentially I don't know how good you have to be to play on to get a tour card, but I can't imagine it's easy. So maybe after I've had a bit more experience on stage or playing pros to see what level I need to get to.
Well, no better place to get that experience than in a few weeks' time in the New Zealand Darts Masters. Congratulations again, Kayden, on qualifying, and we wish you all the best for that debut and what else is to come in 2022.
Appreciate that a lot, Alex.
Thanks again to Kayden for joining us. Now we'll finish up the show with a couple of listener questions, and the first one comes from Dirk Silverwolf Linneman. I think that's the first time we've had a listener question where we've had our listener have a darts nickname in there as well, I'm guessing. So his question is, do you see one of the usual big ones as next world champion, or do we perhaps have a completely new one?
Ooh, I guess completely new one means someone who hasn't won it before. And at some point, it's going to come together, and Michael Smith is going to win not just a major, but the World Championship. And I'm gonna ride that until he proves me right. Is he playing the best in the world right now? No, I said that earlier in the show. But it doesn't take much for him to click back in and play like it. Right when we started to have some doubts after the UK Open about where his head was, he became the best player in the world again for a few months. And I think we're going to see that again at some point this year because he is just too good not to. And I think he's too mature now not to. It's amazing that he hasn't won a major yet. And I just can't think that that's going to stay that way for that long. So I'll go, yeah. We're going to see a completely new world champion this year, and it's going to be Michael Smith because Michael Smith is too good not to be the world champion, and not just ever, but I mean this year.
Getting that tip in early, I like it. Well, yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we are coming towards the end of August, but we are less than 4 months away now from the World Championship, and as we always talk about on this show, this period coming up now, there is going to be so much darts to enjoy, and there's going to be so many tournaments. And think back to the last two World Championships that we've had in the PDC, and there was a form line there, wasn't there, going into the World Championships. We had last year Peter Wright winning the World Match Play. He won a few other titles as well on TV. He was one of the form players going into that event, and he went and won the title for a second time. The previous year, Gerwyn Price, he had such a good year, 2020 going into 2021 when he won that World Championship. So he was someone that picked up a few titles and looked good going into that event and went on to win it and go all the way. So maybe it's going to be a hat trick. We're going to see someone who's played well this year go on and lift the title. And so far this year, you'd have to say it's either going to be Michael van Gerwen, who's won the Premier League and he's won more titles than anyone else this year, or maybe a Luke Humphries, who, okay, he hasn't won a senior title on TV yet, but he's won a lot of Euro Tour titles, which are all played on the stage. So I think I still need to see a few more events this year before I'm going to make a tip on who I think is going to win the World Championship. But if I was going to sway it either way, yeah, why don't we see a new world champion? That would be good again. So, yeah, I'll go with you. I think we'll see a new world champion if I'm going to make a prediction now, but I'm not quite ready to make a prediction on who that is going to be.
Well, at least it means you're right, because we will. Won't go out and say that it'll be Michael Smith. Now, one last listener question. This one comes from Robbie Collins. What's your top 5 favorite darts walk-ons? Something that I don't think we've ever discussed before.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I've got to be honest, it does deserve a lot more time as far as the research and thinking about it than the 2 minutes I gave it before we started the show. So, yeah, maybe we'll come back to this question in a few weeks, and we'll get some of our listeners to let us know what their top 5 walk-ons are. But I've put 5 down on my bit of paper here, and no particular order, but I'll start off with Peter Wright, because you think of the walk-on, and that was part of his persona, the snakebite persona, that really did help transform his career. And you think of how popular he is now, how well he's done out of the game, and the walk-on has been part of it as well. And yeah, one of the most recognisable walk-ons there is in the game. So Peter Wright's on my list. Another one, and this really is an iconic one, and that is Tony O'Shea with the Hey Baby, because I just love that walk-on. I remember when I was getting into darts and I was seeing Tony play at the Grand Slam going up against the PDC players, and he was one of the BDO players, of course. You saw the reaction from the crowd, which was mainly a PDC crowd, but they loved his walk-on, and yeah, that was one of my favourites. Another one more recently, Willie O'Connor in Dublin at the Premier League, the Zombie Song, which of course won our walk-on of the year. So that was a special one. And another one I'll give a mention to, and really it's the players that really embrace the walk-on, because we know that some players not really a fan of the walk-on, are they? They just want to get up there and play their darts. But someone, okay, we've not seen him play on stage for a little while. We're more used to hearing him in the commentary box. But Paul Nicholson, he was someone that I think of that loved that side of it, and probably came from his background as a wrestling fan, I think, when he had the walk-on and everything. But whenever he played on stage, he was someone that you liked to see what he'd get up to on the walk-on as well. I remember he sat down for Phil Taylor's walk-on on the stage. That was a moment that I always remember. So that's one. And last up, and okay, he only used it once, but I'll give a mention to it. Glenn Durrant with the Elvis Costello Pump It Up. Of course, it was the wrong Pump It Up that they played in the Aberdeen P&J Live for his full Premier League debut. It was supposed to be the other Pump It Up, but as an Elvis fan, I appreciated it.
All really good shouts. I mean, they are. One of them is actually on my list as well. I actually did rank them. There's some honorable mentions that I didn't put on here, but I'll just give a mention to. I think the greatest single walk-on, since you mentioned someone who, for a one-off, I have to go with John Henderson in Aberdeen. I can't remember if it was the first or second time he was a contender in the Premier League, but that was just an iconic moment in darts history, which very few walk-ons have ever been. Do another shout out for one that I've just always liked. I've always enjoyed Vincent van der Voort's walk-on, but I didn't put it in the top 5 all time. I think there are better ones, but it's just one that has always brought a smile to my face. But I have my top 5, which actually has 6 names because I put 2 people joint because they're for the exact same reason. But I'll start at number 5. And this one is unique to the Euro Tour, and that's Dave Chisnell's Euro Tour walk-on. Here Comes Alex. I don't think any other player has a uniquely Euro Tour walk-on. And Dave Chisnell is very much a man of habit, always wearing yellow, always doing the same things. But he does mix up his walk-on just for the Euro Tour, and it's just something that's different, but it also he enjoys it and the crowd enjoys it. I have a tie for number 4 because they're for the same reason. Dimitri Vandenberg and Devin Peterson, both with the dancing and the moves and the playing to the crowd, and also just a good beat behind it. Other players have danced before, but not like that. I mean, Dirk van Dijvenbode is pretty unique with his fist pumps. If we can call it dancing, Daryl Gurney and James Wilson have done it as well, but no one does it like Dimitri or Devin. Third, here's where we overlap. I also had Tony O'Shea on my list. Just a classic walk-on, great song, great walk-on, great energy. Whether it was at the Lakeside or at the Grand Slam or wherever he was walking on, everyone got behind him. Second, going old school for this one, Peter Manley, when he switched over to Is This the Way to Amarillo, changing from one of the villains of the game to one of the sweetest people you can watch in a walk-on with that song. Complete change in character, but it suited him and he made the song his own. And number 1, I mean, I'm sure you can guess what number 1 is.
Yeah, I think I know where this is going.
Co Stompe. No, I'm kidding. Mark Walsh. That's kind of Walsh. Anything else for this week?
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, if our listeners get in touch with us as well, let us know your top 5 walk-ons, and maybe next week, because it's still a little bit quiet, we'll read through some of them, give our thoughts on some of your top 5s as well. So tweet us your top 5 walk-ons. That was a great question. Appreciate all the questions, and big thanks to our guests Bernie and Kayden for their time as well. Thanks to our sponsor Dartwolf as well for their continued support. Thanks to everyone for listening as well. And we've got the New Zealand Darts Masters this weekend, the Women's Series back this weekend, so we'll be back next week to look back at both of those. We'll also be looking ahead to the Euro Tour as well, so lots of darts coming up. Make sure you do one thing, and that is enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. And if you don't want to get up at those wee hours of the morning to watch darts in New Zealand, well, then just hang tight, because a couple hours later will be the Women's Series, and then a couple of days later we'll be back with Euro Tours and a bunch of other events right around the corner. So the enjoying of the darts is never far off, especially as we get to the money end of the season. As Alex said, thank you to our guests. Thank you to all of you who are listening, to our sponsor. Don't thank her enough, our producer Hannah, for everything. We'll be back, I would assume, next week. I might miss some weeks over the next month as I'm out of the country on holiday, but I'll try to be here when I can, and when I can't, we'll have someone fill in. There's a lot of darts to enjoy. You just have to hang tight a little bit longer.